Commander Voss was beginning to panic. Zekthara could hear it in his voice as he shouted orders to his remaining ships. The hegemony officer had expected this battle to last maybe 5 minutes. Now 15 minutes had passed and he was losing ships to mining equipment and cargo haulers. The second hegemony cruiser was dead in space. Its hull had been cut open in 3 places by industrial lasers that were never meant to be weapons. The ship was venting atmosphere and debris into space. Most of its crew was probably dead. The few survivors were sending distress signals that no one was answering. The Phoenix came around for another attack run. Lisa Chang was still flying like the laws of physics were merely suggestions. She brought the ship in low and fast, using the gravity of New Montana to slingshot around the planet. The maneuver gave the Phoenix incredible speed, but it also put enormous stress on the hull. Normal pilots would never attempt something so dangerous, but Lisa Chang was not a normal pilot. She pulled the Phoenix out of its gravity turn at exactly the right moment and fired everything at the hegemony flagship. Pete Rodriguez had somehow managed to increase weapon power again. The energy beam that hit Commander Voss's ship was bright enough to be seen from the planet's surface. The hegemony flagship shuddered under the impact. Its shields failed completely and the hull began to buckle. Commander Voss realized his command ship was about to be destroyed by a patrol boat that should not have been able to scratch his paint. He ordered an emergency turn to get away from the Phoenix, but Amy Sullivan had predicted this move. She had positioned 2 cargo haulers exactly where the flagship would try to retreat. The hegemony ship found itself trapped between the Phoenix and 2 civilian vessels loaded with metal ore. The cargo haulers were accelerating toward the flagship on collision course. Commander Voss tried to shoot the cargo ships before they could ram his vessel, but his weapons had been damaged in the previous attack. Only half his guns were working, and those were not firing at full power. The energy beams hit the first cargo hauler and went right through it, but the ship kept coming. The human crew was dead, but they had locked the controls on ramming course before they died. The first cargo hauler slammed into the hegemony flagship at full speed. The impact was devastating. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire and twisted metal. Commander Voss and his entire crew were killed instantly. The explosion was so bright that Zekthara had to adjust its sensors to keep from being blinded. The second cargo hauler changed course to avoid the explosion and headed for the third hegemony cruiser. That ship's captain tried to retreat, but 3 mining vessels had moved to block his escape. The humans were working together like they had practiced this exact battle 100 times. Lisa Chang brought the Phoenix around to pursue the fleeing cruiser. Her ship was damaged from the constant maneuvering and weapon overloads, but it was still fighting. Pete Rodriguez was performing miracles in the engine room, keeping systems running that should have failed long ago. The human engineer was using spare parts and improvised repairs that no manual would recommend. The third hegemony cruiser tried to surrender. Its captain opened a communication channel and offered to withdraw from human space immediately. He promised never to return and to tell his superiors that the colony was too well defended to attack. Captain Morrison responded personally. His voice was cold and hard. "You came here to kill our families and steal our world. Now you want mercy because you're losing. The answer is no." The Phoenix opened fire on the surrendering ship. The attack was devastating because Pete Rodriguez had linked all remaining power to the weapons. The hegemony cruiser's shields collapsed and its hull cracked open like an egg. The ship began breaking apart under its own structural stress. Zekthara was horrified by what it was seeing. The humans were not accepting surrender. They were not following the standard rules of war. They were destroying an enemy that was trying to give up. This was not normal behavior for any civilized species, but the humans were not finished. Amy Sullivan coordinated attacks from all the remaining civilian ships. Mining lasers cut through the dying hegemony cruiser's hull. Cargo haulers rammed into the wreckage to make sure nothing survived. Even the passenger ships joined the attack, using their small engines as improvised weapons. The battle ended with pieces of hegemony ships scattered across the New Montana system. Not a single enemy crew member survived. The humans had achieved total victory against impossible odds, but they had done it by fighting like savages. They had shown no mercy and taken no prisoners. Lisa Chang set the Phoenix into a slow orbit around the planet. The ship was badly damaged and barely holding together, but it had survived. Pete Rodriguez was already working on repairs, somehow finding ways to fix systems that should have been replaced rather than repaired. Amy Sullivan began coordinating rescue operations for the human casualties. Several civilian ships had been lost in the battle along with their crews. The colonists mourned their dead, but they also celebrated their victory. They had driven off an invasion force that should have been unstoppable. Captain Morrison opened a communication channel to all ships in the system. His voice was tired but satisfied.
This is what happens when someone threatens our home.
Remember that message and spread it to anyone who might be listening. Zekathara realized that Morrison was speaking directly to it. The human captain knew there was an observer in the system. He wanted his words recorded and reported to the Galactic Council. He was sending a message to the entire galaxy through Zekathara's recordings. The observer checked its instruments and confirmed that everything had been recorded properly. The battle data would be complete and accurate. But Zekathara was not sure how to interpret what it had seen. The humans had won, but they had won by fighting like nothing in the galactic databases. They had used tactics that made no sense. They had pushed their technology far beyond safe limits. They had sacrificed themselves without hesitation. Most disturbing of all, they had shown no mercy to defeated enemies. They had fought not just to win, but to completely destroy their opponents. The Phoenix began moving toward the asteroid field where most of the battle had taken place. Lisa Chang was flying carefully now, mindful of the damage to her ship. The crew was searching for survivors among the wreckage, but they were not finding any. The humans had been very thorough in their victory. Zekathara began composing its preliminary report. The Council would want to know about this battle immediately. The implications were staggering. If all humans fought like the colonists of New Montana, then the galaxy's understanding of this species would need to be completely revised. The observer had come here expecting to document another routine conquest. Instead, it had witnessed something unprecedented. A minor species had not just defeated a superior enemy. They had annihilated that enemy so completely that no trace remained. This was not how civilized warfare was supposed to work, but the humans had never claimed to be civilized. The first shots came exactly as Zekathara expected. Commander Voss opened fire with his lead cruiser at maximum range. Bright blue energy beams lanced through space toward the Phoenix. The human ship should have been destroyed instantly. Its shields were too weak to stop hegemony weapons, but Lisa Chang was already moving. The Phoenix rolled hard to starboard just as the energy beams reached its position. The shots passed through empty space where the ship had been a second before. Zekathara checked its instruments twice. The human pilot had started her evasive maneuver before the hegemony weapons fired. That should have been impossible. The Phoenix continued its charge toward the enemy formation. Captain Morrison opened a communication channel to all three hegemony ships. His voice was calm and steady. Hegemony vessels, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the UCS Phoenix. You are not welcome in human space. Turn around and leave now, Commander Voss responded with amusement in his voice. Human captain, you are outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender immediately and your people will be treated well. Continue this foolish resistance and you will all die. Morrison's reply was immediate. We didn't come this far to give up now. If you want our world, you'll have to take it. The second hegemony cruiser opened fire. This time, Lisa Chang waited until the last possible moment before changing course. The Phoenix dropped below the plane of the attack and accelerated toward the enemy ships. More weapons fire filled the space around the human vessel, but somehow none of it connected. The pilot was flying like she could see the future. Zekathara realized the human ship was not trying to avoid the battle. It was trying to get closer. This made no sense. Smaller ships should keep their distance and use speed to survive. Flying directly at superior firepower was suicide. Every military manual in the galaxy agreed on this basic principle. The Phoenix reached firing range and opened fire with its main guns. The weapons were old and weak, but Pete Rodriguez had done something to them. The energy output was nearly double what the specifications showed. The shots hit the lead hegemony cruiser and actually damaged its shields. Commander Voss sounded surprised when he reported the hit to his other ships. Behind the Phoenix, the civilian vessels were spreading out into attack formation. Zekathara watched in amazement as mining ships armed with industrial cutting lasers moved to flank the enemy. Cargo haulers loaded with metal ore were accelerating toward the battle like they planned to ram the hegemony ships. This was not normal behavior for non-military vessels. The third hegemony cruiser tried to target the approaching civilians. Its captain probably thought they would be easy kills. But the mining ships were using the asteroid field around New Montana like cover. They would pop out from behind rocks, fire their crude weapons, then disappear again. Their shots were not very powerful, but they were coming from unexpected directions. Lisa Chang brought the Phoenix around for another attack run. This time she flew straight up relative to the enemy formation, rolled inverted, and dove down at the command ship. Her flying was beyond anything Zekathara had seen from human pilots in the databases. She was pushing the ship past its design limits but somehow keeping it intact. The Phoenix fired everything it had at the Hegemony flagship. Pete Rodriguez had managed to link all the ship's weapons into one concentrated blast. The energy beam that hit Commander Voss's ship was bright enough to overwhelm the observer's sensors. When the light faded, the Hegemony cruiser's forward shields were down and its hull was burned. Commander Voss was no longer amused. He ordered all 3 ships to focus their fire on the Phoenix. The space around the human ship filled with energy beams and missile trails. No pilot could dodge that much firepower. The Phoenix should have been vaporized. Instead, Lisa Chang did something that made Zekathara question its understanding of physics. She flew the Phoenix through the weapons fire like she was dancing. The ship rolled and twisted and dove through gaps that seemed too small for it to fit. Missiles exploded around the hull without doing damage. Energy beams passed so close they should have melted the armor. One of the mining ships emerged from behind an asteroid and fired its cutting laser at the second Hegemony cruiser. The industrial tool was never designed as a weapon, but it cut through the warship's hull like it was paper. The cruiser lost atmosphere and began spinning out of control. Its captain screamed damage reports over the radio. Amy Sullivan coordinated the civilian ship attacks from her position on the Phoenix. She was using mining survey data to predict asteroid movements and create firing solutions for ships that had no military targeting systems. Somehow, she was turning cargo haulers and ore processors into effective combat units. The damaged Hegemony cruiser tried to withdraw from the battle. Its captain had decided that discretion was the better part of valor. But 3 civilian ships moved to block its escape route. They were willing to sacrifice themselves to keep the enemy from running away. This level of coordination suggested the humans had planned for exactly this situation. Commander Voss realized he was not fighting a desperate last stand. He was fighting an ambush that had been prepared in advance. The humans had used the 3 days of warning to set up the entire battlefield in their favor. They had turned their weakness into strength and their fear into fury. The Phoenix made another attack run, and this time Pete Rodriguez did something that violated every safety protocol Zekathara knew. He overloaded the ship's reactor to feed more power to the weapons. The risk of explosion was enormous, but the increase in firepower was incredible. The Phoenix hit the 3rd Hegemony cruiser hard enough to crack its hull. Lisa Chang was laughing over the radio as she pulled the Phoenix out of its attack dive. The sound sent chills through Zekathara's spine. The human pilot was not afraid. She was having fun. This was not the behavior of someone fighting for survival. This was the behavior of a predator that had found worthy prey. The battle was only 10 minutes old, but already the situation had changed completely. The Hegemony ships were damaged and confused. Their superior numbers and technology were not giving them the easy victory they expected. The humans were fighting with tactics that made no sense but somehow worked. Zekathara began to understand that it was not watching the destruction of a human colony. It was watching something else entirely. Something that would change how the galaxy thought about this new species. The massacre everyone expected was happening, but the humans were not the ones being massacred. Zekathara adjusted the recording device on its chest and looked out at the endless black of space. The Galactic Council had given it a simple job: watch the humans fight and write down what happened. Most council members thought this would be a very short report. The Vorthak Observer had done this work for over 200 cycles. It had watched the proud Zelani warriors fall to superior weapons. It had seen the cunning Thros outflanked by better tactics. Every time the story was the same. The weaker species fought bravely for a while, then they died or surrendered. The council needed these reports to understand how different species handled war. Knowledge was power, and power kept the galaxy stable. Humans were new to space. They had only been flying between stars for about 50 years. Their technology was basic. Their ships were slow and poorly armed. Their weapons were crude compared to what the great powers used. Most council analysts rated them as barely worth studying, but the Hegemony had chosen this human colony as their first target, so someone needed to watch what happened. Kepler 442b hung in front of Zekthara like a brown and green marble. The humans called it New Montana, though it looked nothing like the pictures it had seen of Earth. The planet had good minerals, which was why humans had come here 20 years ago. About 50,000 colonists lived here now. They mined rare metals and sent them back to Earth. It was a simple operation with simple people. The human defense force was even simpler. One patrol ship called the UCS Phoenix orbited the planet. It was small and old, probably built 30 years ago. The ship carried maybe 40 crew members. Their captain was named Jake Morrison, a former Earth military officer who had come to the colonies to retire. The ship had basic weapons and shields that were already outdated when they were installed. Zekthara had read Morrison's file. The human was 52 years old, had served in several Earth conflicts, and had a reputation for being stubborn. His crew was mostly young colonists who wanted adventure. His pilot was Lisa Chang, barely 25 and fresh from flight school. His engineer was Pete Rodriguez, who had learned his job by fixing mining equipment. His tactical officer was Amy Sullivan, whose only real combat experience came from training simulations. Against this tiny force, the hegemony was sending 3 heavy cruisers. Each cruiser was twice the size of the Phoenix and carried 3 times as many weapons. The hegemony ships were new, fast, and crewed by experienced warriors. Their commander was Voss, a veteran of dozens of battles. The math was simple. 3 modern warships against 1 old patrol boat. The humans would surrender quickly or die quickly. Either way, it would be over fast. Zekthara had requested permission to observe from a safe distance. Its ship was small and civilian, carrying only basic life support and recording equipment. The Vorthak were known throughout the galaxy for their neutrality and their skill at documentation. No one would shoot at an observer ship during a battle. War had rules, and protecting observers was one of them. The colony had received word that the hegemony fleet was coming. Standard procedure was to send a surrender message and negotiate terms. Most colonies did this. It saved lives and prevented damage to valuable infrastructure. The hegemony usually accepted surrender from weak opponents. They preferred to capture resources intact rather than destroy them in battle. But Captain Morrison had not sent a surrender message. Instead, he had moved his ship into orbit around New Montana and activated its weapons systems. The colonists on the planet had also done something strange. Instead of evacuating or hiding, they had started moving their civilian ships into defensive positions. Mining vessels, cargo haulers, and passenger transports were forming up behind the Phoenix like they planned to fight. Zekthara found this behavior puzzling but not unprecedented. Some species fought hopeless battles for honor or religious reasons. The humans might have similar cultural motivations. It would make the observation more interesting, but it would not change the outcome. Brave intentions could not overcome basic physics and superior firepower. The observer checked its recording equipment one more time. Everything was working perfectly. The cameras would capture the battle from multiple angles. The sensors would record energy signatures and weapon impacts. The communication array would intercept all radio traffic between the human ships. When this was over, the Council would have a complete record of how humans behaved when facing impossible odds. 3 days ago, the hegemony ships had jumped into the system. They had taken up positions at the edge of sensor range, probably planning their attack and giving the humans time to reconsider. Standard psychological warfare. Most species use this time to panic, argue, and eventually surrender. It usually worked, but the humans had used the time differently. They had run drills. Zekthara watched through its long-range sensors as the Phoenix practiced attack runs and evasive maneuvers. The civilian ships practiced formation flying and communication procedures. The colonists on the planet had started broadcasting tactical information about asteroid locations and sensor blind spots. They were acting like they could actually win this fight. The hegemony ships finally began moving toward New Montana. Their formation was textbook perfect. The 3 cruisers approached in a triangle pattern that gave them overlapping fields of fire and mutual support. Commander Voss was taking no chances, even against such weak opposition. The hegemony had not conquered half the galaxy by being careless. As the enemy ships came closer, the Phoenix moved to intercept them. Captain Morrison was taking his old patrol boat directly toward 3 ships that could destroy it with their first salvo. Behind the Phoenix, the civilian ships followed in loose formation. Miners and cargo haulers pretending to be warships. It would have been funny if it were not about to become a tragedy. Zekathara settled back in its observation chair and activated all recording systems. The battle would begin soon. History was about to repeat itself once again. Another small species would learn that courage could not overcome superior technology. The galaxy would continue as it always had, with the strong ruling the weak. The observer had no idea how wrong it was about to be. 3 days after the battle, Zekathara completed its final report to the Galactic Council. The document was longer and more detailed than any previous observation report the Council had received. The observer had been forced to completely revise its understanding of human military capabilities based on what it had witnessed. The human ships had departed New Montana system the previous day. The Phoenix had undergone full repairs and upgrades using salvaged hegemony technology. Pete Rodriguez had somehow managed to integrate alien components with human systems, creating hybrid technology that was more advanced than either species had possessed. Individually, Captain Morrison had promoted Lisa Chang to squadron leader and given her command of 3 new patrol ships that had arrived from Earth. Amy Sullivan had been assigned to train other human tactical officers using the lessons learned from the New Montana battle. The colonists were sharing their knowledge with the broader human military as quickly as possible. The recovery teams had collected every piece of hegemony wreckage larger than a coffee cup. Human engineers were already reverse engineering the alien technology and adapting it for their own use. What had taken the hegemony decades to develop, the humans were copying and improving in a matter of days. But the most significant change was in human military doctrine. The Earth fleet had studied Morrison's tactical recordings and was implementing new training programs based on his methods. The desperate improvisation that had won the battle was being turned into standard operating procedures. For all human military units, Zekathara had intercepted communications between Earth and several human colonies. The message was clear and consistent. Humans were preparing for a larger war with the hegemony. They were not content to simply defend their existing territory. They were planning to take the fight to their enemies. The observer's report began with a summary that would shock the council members. The human species represents a significant military threat that has been severely underestimated by all galactic powers. Their technological limitations are offset by tactical innovation, strategic thinking, and psychological characteristics that make them extremely effective warriors. The report documented specific examples of human military capabilities. Lisa Chang's flying abilities were analyzed in detail, with the conclusion that human pilots possessed reflexes and spatial reasoning that exceeded most known species. Pete Rodriguez's engineering modifications were described as examples of human ability to adapt and improve. Technology under pressure. Amy Sullivan's tactical coordination was presented as evidence of human strategic thinking. Her ability to turn civilian vessels into combat units suggested that humans could militarize their entire population if necessary. This made accurate assessment of human military strength almost impossible. But the most important section of the report dealt with human psychology. Zekathara had concluded that humans possessed what it called adaptive aggression. They became more dangerous when threatened rather than less dangerous. This was the opposite of normal species behavior and made humans unpredictable in combat situations. The report included audio recordings of Captain Morrison's final transmission. "This is what happens when someone threatens our home. Remember that message and spread it to anyone who might be listening." Zekathara noted that this was clearly intended as a warning to the entire galaxy. The psychological analysis continued with observations about human refusal to surrender. Every other species in the galaxy would eventually give up when faced with impossible odds. Humans seemed to fight harder when the situation became hopeless. This made them extremely difficult opponents because they could not be intimidated or discouraged. The report's conclusion was stark and uncompromising. Humanity should be immediately reclassified from a minor species to a potential major power. Their military capabilities will likely increase exponentially over the next few years as they adapt captured technology and develop new tactics based on recent combat experience. Zekathara recommended immediate diplomatic contact with human leadership. The observer suggested that the council should attempt to establish friendly relations with humanity before the species became too powerful to negotiate with as equals. The alternative was eventual conflict that could destabilize the entire galaxy. The report also included strategic recommendations for other species. Any civilization that chose to fight humans should expect casualties that were completely disproportionate to human military strength. Human tactical unpredictability and refusal to surrender made them far more dangerous than their technology suggested. Most disturbing was the observer's analysis of human learning capabilities. The colonists at New Montana had adapted hegemony technology within days of capturing it. They had developed new tactics during the battle itself and implemented them immediately. This suggested that humans would improve their military capabilities much faster than normal species development cycles. The report concluded with a warning about human expansion. Based on intercepted communications, humans were planning to establish new colonies in previously uninhabited systems. They were also upgrading the defenses of existing colonies, using lessons learned from the New Montana battle. Within a few years, human space would be protected by defensive forces that could defeat much larger invasion fleets. Any species that wanted to stop human expansion would need to act quickly, before the humans became too well defended to challenge. But Zekthara's final recommendation was against military action. The observer believed that fighting humans would only make them stronger and more dangerous. The species seemed to thrive on conflict and adversity. The best strategy was diplomatic engagement that channeled human aggression toward mutual enemies rather than toward council members. The report ended with Pete Rodriguez's final transmission from the destroyed Hegemony flagship. "This is what happens when you threaten our home. Remember that." Zekthara noted that this message had been broadcast on all frequencies and would eventually reach every civilization in the galaxy. 2 weeks after submitting its report, Zekthara received new orders from the Council. The observer was being reassigned to monitor human military developments on a permanent basis. The Council wanted continuous intelligence about human capabilities and intentions. The orders came with a priority classification that Zekthara had never seen before. Humanity had been elevated to species of major concern, based solely on the New Montana battle report. This was unprecedented for a species that had been spacefaring for less than a century. Zekthara accepted the new assignment with mixed feelings. The observer was fascinated by human tactical innovation and wanted to learn more about their military thinking. But it was also concerned about the implications for galactic stability. The battle at New Montana had lasted less than an hour, but its consequences would reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy. The humans had announced their arrival as a military force in the most dramatic way possible. They had turned what should have been their destruction into a complete victory over superior enemies. The massacre that Zekthara had come to observe had indeed taken place. But the victims were not the humans. They were the hegemony forces who had underestimated what humans were capable of when their homes and families were threatened. The observer's final entry in its personal log was simple and direct. "I came here to watch humans die. Instead, I watched them become something the galaxy has never seen before. The implications of this change will be felt for generations to come." Zekthara spent the next several hours reviewing its recordings. Every time it watched the battle again, the observer discovered something new and disturbing about human combat behavior. The more it analyzed the data, the more convinced it became that the galaxy had seriously underestimated this species. The Phoenix was drifting through the debris field now, its hull scored and blackened from the fighting. Lisa Chang had shut down the main engines to let Pete Rodriguez work on repairs. The ship looked like it should have been destroyed 3 times over, but somehow it was still functional. Human engineering was apparently more resilient than anyone had realized. Captain Morrison was in his ready room, dictating after-action reports to his computer. Zekthara had managed to intercept these recordings through its advanced sensors. The human captain was methodically documenting every aspect of the battle, including tactical decisions that had seemed insane at the time, but had somehow worked perfectly. The most disturbing revelation was how much preparation had gone into this victory. The colonists had not just fought bravely when attacked. They had spent months preparing for exactly this scenario. They had studied hegemony tactics and developed specific counters for every standard attack pattern. Amy Sullivan had used mining survey data to create detailed tactical maps of the entire system. She knew exactly where every asteroid was located and how the gravity fields would affect ship movement. When the battle started, she had turned the entire system into a weapon against the invaders. Pete Rodriguez had been modifying the Phoenix's systems for weeks before the attack. His impossible weapon overloads and engine modifications were not desperate improvisation. They were carefully planned upgrades that pushed human technology far beyond its supposed limits. The engineer had essentially rebuilt the ship's most critical systems without anyone noticing. Lisa Chang had been practicing her insane flying maneuvers in secret training sessions. Her ability to dodge enemy fire and execute impossible turns was the result of hundreds of hours of preparation. She had pushed herself and her ship to levels of performance that should have been impossible, but the most chilling discovery was the coordination between military and civilian personnel. The colonists had not panicked when the invasion began. They had calmly executed a plan that turned cargo haulers and mining ships into effective combat units. This suggested a level of military organization that went far beyond what any colony should possess. Zekathara realized that the humans had been expecting this attack. Somehow they had known the hegemony was coming and had prepared accordingly. This raised disturbing questions about human intelligence capabilities. How had a primitive species learned about secret hegemony military plans? The observer's analysis was interrupted by new activity in the system. Several more human ships had just arrived through hyperspace. These were not civilian vessels. They were military ships from Earth, responding to the distress signal that Morrison had sent before the battle began. The lead ship identified itself as the UCS Titan, a heavy cruiser that was much larger than the Phoenix. Its captain was a woman named Karen White, who seemed very interested in the debris field. She began launching recovery teams to collect pieces of destroyed hegemony technology. Captain White opened a communication channel with Morrison. Her voice was professional but pleased. "Jake, it looks like you had quite a party while we were traveling. How many ships did they send?" Morrison's reply was matter-of-fact. 3 heavy cruisers under Commander Voss. Standard hegemony task force probably intended as a probe attack. We eliminated all enemy vessels with no survivors. White sounded impressed. Any casualties on our side? We lost 4 civilian ships and 37 colonists. The Phoenix took heavy damage but remains operational. Pete says he can have us combat ready again in 6 hours. Zekathara was struck by how casually the humans discussed their victory. They acted like defeating superior enemy forces was routine. There was no celebration or surprise, just professional satisfaction at a job well done. The recovery teams from the Titan began collecting hegemony technology fragments. Zekathara realized the humans were not just destroying their enemies. They were also studying them. Every piece of wreckage would be analyzed to learn more about hegemony capabilities and weaknesses. Captain White's next transmission was directed at the entire system. "This is Captain Karen White of the UCS Titan to all vessels in the New Montana system. We have confirmed the complete destruction of a hegemony invasion force. This engagement will be reported to Earth Command and forwarded to all human colonies as a tactical study." The message was clearly intended for Zekathara's benefit. The humans wanted the observer to know that this battle would be shared with their entire species. They were treating the victory as a learning experience that would help them fight future battles more effectively. Pete Rodriguez had the Phoenix's engines back online within 4 hours. The engineer's repair work was nothing short of miraculous. He had not just fixed the damage from the battle. He had actually improved several systems while making the repairs. The ship was now more capable than it had been before the fighting started. Lisa Chang took the Phoenix on a test flight around New Montana. Her flying was still aggressive and unconventional, but now it was also more confident. The battle had taught her new limits for both herself and her ship. She was already planning how to use these lessons in future combat situations. Amy Sullivan was working with the crews of the civilian ships, conducting detailed debriefings about their combat performance. She was documenting which improvised tactics had worked and which had failed. The humans were turning every aspect of the battle into training data for future conflicts. The most disturbing part of the human behavior was how quickly they had adapted to warfare. None of these colonists were professional soldiers, but they had fought like veterans. They had shown tactical flexibility and strategic thinking that suggested natural military instincts. Captain Morrison opened a final communication channel to all ships in the system. His message was brief and direct. The hegemony sent 3 ships to test our defenses. They learned that humans do not make easy targets. Anyone else who wants to test us is welcome to try. Zekathara understood that Morrison was speaking to more than just the immediate audience. The human captain knew his words would be reported throughout the galaxy. He was sending a warning to every potential enemy that humans would fight back harder than expected. The Observer began working on its final report to the Galactic Council. The implications of this battle were enormous. Humanity was not the weak, primitive species that everyone had assumed. They were something much more dangerous. The humans had not just won a battle against superior odds. They had demonstrated capabilities that suggested they could become a major military power in a very short time. Their adaptability, resourcefulness, and ruthless determination made them unlike any species in the galactic databases. Most concerning was their apparent willingness to fight to the death rather than surrender. This made them extremely dangerous opponents because they could not be intimidated or discouraged by superior force. They would keep fighting until they won, or until they were completely destroyed. Zekathara realized it had witnessed something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy. The humans were no longer a minor species to be ignored. They were a potential threat that would require careful handling by the major powers. The massacre the Observer had come to document had indeed taken place. But it was the hegemony forces who had been massacred, not the humans. This battle would be remembered as the moment when humanity announced its arrival as a galactic military power.